Hello, my friends. Good Erev Shabbos. Happy Friday, followed by a beautiful, uplifting, and inspirational Shabbos Kodesh. This week's Parsha, Parshas Vayetze, talks about how Yaakov, running away from his brother Esav, is running to his uncle Lavan. But he's not going to too much of a better place because Lavan is known to be a swindler and a liar and a cheat. He's having it tough. But then he lays down at what was really the future Temple Mount. And he has a dream that is actually a form of prophecy. And he sees this beautiful ladder going from the earth up into the heavens. But what it says at the beginning, before he fell asleep, is the part I want to focus on. Because it says, Vayifka b'makom, and he met up to the place, Vayelin Sham, and he stayed over. Ki ba shemesh, because the sun had set. What does that mean? He met up at the place, Vayifka b'makom. So the Talmud teaches us it's a term of prayer. He went to pray there. Ki ba ha-shemesh. Why did he want to pray there? Because the sun had set. Yaakov wanted to pray specifically at night. The Talmud teaches us that Avraham, Yaakov's grandfather, Tikein Shachris, set up the morning prayers. Yitzchak, Yaakov's father, Tikein Mincha, he set up the afternoon prayer, and Yaakov Tikein Arvis. Yaakov set up the evening prayer. So one of my rabbis one time asked a great question. Do you really think Avram, the forefather of the Jewish people, didn't pray 3 times a day and he only prayed Shacharis? Or Yitzchak only prayed Mincha? Or Yaakov only prayed Mariv? Nah. They all prayed all 3. But what was their emphasis? What was their makeup? Avram, his life was bright and clear. It was a new dawn, a new day, a new beginning. He started the idea of monotheism, the idea of belief in one God. A new start. Shachris, morning prayer, something new. Yitzchak, he was the inheritor of everything that Avram had. Mincha, afternoon prayer. The sun is at its peak. Everything's clear. Everything's bright. Everything makes sense. And Yitzchak continued with the work of Avram. Yaakov. What was Yaakov's life? Yaakov had it tough. Yes, Avram had his tests. But Avram's tests were God saying, yes, I'm here and I'm testing you. Go sacrifice your son. Go throw yourself into a raging inferno, pronouncing my belief, and expect to be saved. Yitzchak, jump on an altar. Yaakov, what were his tests? If you were to open up a newspaper and read what goes on in a day-to-day life, and for anybody in the 21st century, his tests were no different than ours. He had trouble with his brother. He ran away. He ended up marrying the daughters of Lavan, which means Lavan was his father-in-law. He had trouble with his father-in-law. Who doesn't have trouble with their father-in-law? And then he comes back, and his daughter is kidnapped, and his sons are fighting. There's fighting between the brothers, and he loses a son. He doesn't know where he is. Problem after problem after problem after problem, but every single one of them is stuff that we see all the time. And yet, Yaakov Tikein Arvis. Nothing was clear. Avram had everything clear. His tests were obviously God-driven. Yitzchak was a continuation of that. But Yaakov, it was dark. He didn't understand. And yet, he emphasize the prayer that is said at night when life isn't clear. There's a story I love to tell. When I first started out in this beautiful business of spreading Torah, I was young, had very little to no experience, and I was on a plane either going from California to California, I don't remember. This guy sits down next to me, and he's looking, true story by the way. Guy sits down next to me, and he's looking me up and down. He saw the yarmulke on my head, he saw the tzitzis on my, coming out of my belt, and he's looking me up and down and up and down. And he says, "You're Jewish, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Me too. You're religious, aren't you?" "I like to think so." And he said, "I hate religious people." And I'm thinking, and I wanted a quiet flight. Oh boy. Then I realized he was trying to bait me. So in my head, I said, "Okay, I'll take the bait, I'll bite." But I smiled at him and said, "So why do you hate religious people?" And in the back of my mind, I was still saying, "And I want a quiet flight." And he said, "I think you people are a bunch of weaklings. Mentally, emotionally weak. And it bothers me, your attitude, and that's why I can't stand you people." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, when things go bad, what do? You say, Gamzu Latova, everything's for the good. Hakol bidei shamayim, everything's in God's hands. And you know what? It's not always good. Life stinks. And things get messed up, and people's lives get ruined, and it's not everything's for the good. And it's not everything's God's hand." I said, that's pretty harsh. What do you mean? He said, "Well, take me for example. So when I was a young kid, my mother passed away. My father became an alcoholic. I have one brother who got very heavy into using drugs, and he's in rehab now. I have another brother who got very heavy into pushing drugs, and he's in jail now. And I have a sister who ran away. Never saw her again. I also got messed up, but eventually I straightened out. I now have an Arab girlfriend. I think he said that purposely to twist the knife. I pretended not to even notice. And I make race cars for a living, and then he pulls out a picture of his girlfriend in front of the race car. He says, "But life is tough, and it's hard, and it's not fair, and it's not all good like you religious people would say." I regret the fact that I really didn't have a proper answer to give him. I don't remember what I answered, but I do remember how years later my answer in my head to him developed, and I wish I could meet him again. Because only a few months later I thought about it, and I said, he's so wrong. He's so wrong. It's not a weakness to be able to say everything is in God's hands and Gamzu Latova, everything's for the good. That takes strength. That takes courage not to let the bumps in life rip you apart and fall over. To realize everything's in God's hands and keep going in life takes strength, not weakness. But then I got a little older, and I realized there is something to what he said. Because that bitachon, which means faith in God, absolute faith and trust in God, is a safety net. It gives us strength to go on, but it works together. You see, when things go wrong, it takes a strong person to say, I'm not going to let it get me down, and I'm going to tell myself, and I'm going to realize, and I'm going to recognize the truth that everything's in God's hands, and I'm going to keep going, and life is going to work out because God's in charge, and everything happens for a reason. That takes strength. But once you get there, once you're able to have that strength, then when things get tough again, you can fall back on that. So I coined a phrase. You ready? I coined a phrase. Say this over, but when you say it over, you got to say it in my name. And that is, it takes strength to have faith, or bitachon. But faith, or bitachon, will give you strength. Again, the Hebrew term, it takes strength to have bitachon, but bitachon will give you strength, or it takes strength to have faith, but faith will give you strength. It works both ways. And there's a pasuk, there's a verse in the writings of the Torah that are a proof to what I'm saying. And that is, Baruch HaGever Asher Yivtach BaHashem, blessed is the strong one who has faith in God, V'haya Hashem Yivtacho, and God will be his strength. In order to get to that point, you got to be a gever. You got to be strong. But once you get there, that can be your safety net. And God will continue to give you the strength. So Yaakov, the one who had to suffer through the darkness without the clarity, he was able to discover God, or to see God in the darkness and pray and realize God's in charge. He's the one that's called the Bechir Shabavos, the chosen one of the Avos, the greatest of the three. And on God's throne, there is an image of an eagle, a bear, and a man. And that man, if you were God, if you had these species, a bear, an eagle, and man, you would have the best of the species, right? Who is the best of the men that he has on his throne? Who would you pick? Moses, Adam, Yaakov. Not Avram, not Yitzchak, not Moses, Yaakov. The best of the species. Why? Because he was able to rise above the darkness and see God.